Hi, today's video is part of the permitted development series. This is part one of permitted development for extension, alteration or improvement of dwellings. My name is Neil Scroxton and I'm the Managing Director of Scroxton & Partners. We are planning consultants, architects and construction managers. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. Please feel free to subscribe and tick the little bell so that you get an update when we put out new content. And if you're joining us again, welcome back. Okay, so again, just a quick recap on what is permitted development. Permitted development is the stuff that you can do to your house, the extensions, the alterations, the changes that you can make to your house without requiring planning permission. Now, you can go for what's called a lawful development certificate. That's basically where you check the work that you want to have done with the local authority. This is a useful thing to have if you're thinking of selling your property soon, because it just means that if solicitors ask whether or not the work you've done has been lawful, it cuts through that red tape very quickly. However, it's not something that you have to do, that is an option. And so with Class A, which is to do with the extension, alteration and improvement of your dwelling, it doesn't cover off lofts. We've covered off lofts with Part B and C. Part A essentially covers off the ground and the first floor alterations. And so it looks a lot at the plan, the section and the elevation of your property and the rules that we need to follow to make sure that you don't require planning permission. And so first off, with permitted development, we have to remember that it's always about what you can't have, not necessarily what you can have. So it's a much easier way to explain the rules when they're telling you what you can't have. So as with all permitted developments, the first part of Class A essentially says if your property was something else beforehand, so if your property has been created through a change of use, be that a barn conversion or changing from an office to a residential dwelling, then you cannot do works under permitted development. So you can't extend your property under permitted development and you would require planning permission. The next part of the class talks about the overall size of permitted development that you can have. So, and that can be adding in lots of different parts from permitted development, but essentially what it talks about the curtilage of your property, and it says that you cannot increase the size of your property to a point where it would cover more than 50% of the curtilage of your property. Now, curtilage is an interesting word. It doesn't mean to the boundary of your property, and the reason it doesn't mean that is because we have lots of different scenarios across the UK. So you have obviously terraced houses that have a garden at the back and might have a little bit of space at the front or no space at the front. You have semi-detached properties that have sort of garden around the front, little path down the side and then something at the front. You've got detached properties, you've got farms that have got gardens associated with the farm and then lots of additional land. So the curtilage is defined as the land that is associated with the house itself. So for example, let's say that we were, let's draw out a little example. Let's say that we were a house with, with a garden that went all around, and let's say that we also owned a field in the back, field at the back, with this being a house. So if we looked at the boundary of what we owned, we would put a line all the way around the garden and the field, but the curtilage is just this part, the bit that's very, very clearly related to the house. And that's quite an important definition when you're looking at permitted development rights. And the next part of this particular class, Class A, again talks about something that's common amongst most of the classes, is that the height of what you're doing cannot exceed the height of the existing house. So whatever extension that you're looking to put on, whatever alteration that you're looking to make, it cannot go above the ridge height of your original house. So if you've got a bungalow, it can go no higher than the ridge of the bungalow. If you've got a two-storey house, it can go no higher than the ridge of your two-storey house. If you have a flat roof, it can go no higher than the flat roof. A follow-on from the extension not being any higher than the house, it also talks about the eaves. So the eaves are, when you're looking at a roof, the eaves are the bit that points where you've got the gutter normally, but this also refers to, if you've got a flat roof, it would refer to the height of the parapet. So the parapet in a flat roof scenario is the flat bit that you see at the top of the wall. And what this part of the class says is that that cannot be any higher than the existing house. So wherever your existing gutter line is, that is as high as your new gutter line can go. As we read through the class, we then start to come across the next restriction, which is where we first meet the term principal elevation. And what the next part of the class says is that you cannot extend beyond the principal elevation. So the principal elevation is the elevation that anybody looking at your property would instantly say that's the front of the house. And normally that faces a highway. Where you start to get some confusion is where you've maybe got a property that's on the corner of two streets, or where you've got a property that's maybe at a funny angle to the road, and that's where this part of the class extends a little further. And it also says if you have a side elevation that faces a highway, again, you can't extend there. So let's just show a very quick example that if this is your house and this is the street, you cannot put any form of extension at the front here. So that would be a no, that would be a yes, and that would be a yes, unless we have a street here, and then this would turn into a no. So after covering off where you can't extend on your property, the next part of Class A starts to talk about how far you can extend in certain places and what the limits are. So again, we'll go to the board, and let's start off by looking at a single-story extension for most houses. So if you are a detached house, you are allowed to, let's get a new pen, you are allowed to extend out to the rear of your property by 4 meters all the way across. 4 meters, as long as that extension itself is only 4 meters tall, and that 4 meters tall is taken from the highest point of the ground where you're extending. If you're an attached property, so if you're a terrace or if you're a semi-detached property, so if there is another house here, that extension shrinks and goes from 4 meters to 3 meters. Okay, so to make it all a little bit more complicated, there is an option that you can enact if you are not on what is called Article 2/3 land. So if you're not in a special area of interest, you're not in a conservation area, you're not in an area of natural beauty, you can discuss with your neighbours. So you can go through a neighbourhood consultation process, and you can actually increase the size of a single-story extension. So from if you're a detached house, that 4 meters doubles to 8 meters, and if you're an attached house, that 3 meters doubles to 6 meters. So that can give you a hell of a lot more floor space, but again, you have to go through a neighbourhood consultation process. After Class A has tackled single-story extensions to the rear, the next thing it moves on to is two-story extensions. And two-story extensions are very similar. They have a restriction in how deep they can go away from the house, but here we get an additional constraint put onto the design with regard to the rear boundary wall of your property or fence. So again, if this is your home, what Class A says that you can have essentially is you can have a two-story extension out to the rear that is 3 meters deep, but where it puts in this additional restriction is the back wall of your garden. This new elevation cannot be any closer than 7 meters from the rear wall or the rear boundary of your property. So thank you for watching part one of permitted development, extension, alteration and improvements to dwellings. As always, if you like what we're doing, please leave some comments in the box below and let us know if there's anything we can improve on. Please subscribe and tick the bell so that you're reminded when we create new content. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. My name's Neil Croxton and this has been part one of permitted development for extending, altering or improving dwellings.